Good morning. Welcome to the virtual town hall organized by the Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, Hong Kong and Macau. My name is Lawrence Liu, and I'm the Deputy Chairman of the Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, Hong Kong, Macau. In Hong Kong, we are known as Maychamp. And there is Maybank, as you're aware. Our market cap might not be as big as Maybank, but we are probably as popular as Maybank in Hong Kong. I would like to wish a very good morning to His Excellency, Raja Datuk Nushiwan Zainal Abidin, the Ambassador of Malaysia to the People's Republic of China, the Consul General, Mr. Yap Wei Sin, Consul General to Hong Kong, and all the participants to our virtual town hall. Good morning. We thank His Excellency Datuk Raja for spending his time with us today. And I would like our Consul General to introduce His Excellency later on. So I'm going to briefly explain the format for today's town hall. First, I'll be welcoming our chairman, Datuk K.C. Gan, to make the welcoming remarks. Datuk Gan is the chairman of Maychamp since its inception in 2014. He's the chairman of HL Global Enterprises Limited, a company listed in Singapore, Director of China Yuchai International Limited, a company listed in New York Stock Exchange, and Managing Director of Hong Leong International Hong Kong Limited. He is a seasoned banker, property developer, and investor and operator of hotels. For those who are in Beijing, who may be familiar with the Beijing Riviera, Datuk Gan developed that. He also developed the Grand Hyatt in Taipei and Millennium Hotel in Xiamen for the Hong Leong Group. Datuk Gan was educated in Penang Free School and is an graduate of the University of Malaysia. He is an all-rounded sportsman, so he still keeps himself very fit at this stage. After Datuk Gan's remarks, I'll be inviting Mr. Yap, our Consul General, to introduce His Excellency. And before His Excellency's speech, we will be playing a 3-minute video, which will show the highlights of the Medical Ball 2019. The Medical Ball is usually held annually somewhere in August and September this year, every year. But this year, we are aiming to have it on 31st of December 2020. But that is subject to how COVID behaves. Lately, COVID has not been behaving very well, has been quite naughty, as we know. Back to the agenda, we're going to allocate a lot of time for the Q&A. So the Q&A will be moderated by Dato Sri Chia Cheng Hai, the co-chairman and co-CIO of Value Partner Group. And Dato Chia Cheng Hai is also the convener of our Advisory Council for Maychamp. So please send us your questions you may have via the Q&A features, and the moderator will choose the questions for His Excellency. So there are two parts to the Q&A. The first part is you send in, and for the second part, we actually would like you to raise the questions to His Excellency directly. So for that, I also need you to send us the questions beforehand, and then I'll call upon you to unmute your mic and start the camera so that you can address the questions directly to His Excellencies. So we hope to end this event by 11:30 today. Thank you, and I'm going to hand over to our chairman, Datuk K.C. Gan. Mr. Gan, Datuk Gan, please.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good morning to everyone at this webinar, whether you are Malaysian or non-Malaysian, and whether you are currently in Hong Kong, in China, in Malaysia, or anywhere else. In light of COVID-19, we are hosting a very special webinar where we bring together, firstly from Beijing, His Excellency Raja Datuk Nushiwan Zainal Abidin, the Ambassador of Malaysia to the People's Republic of China. And secondly, from Hong Kong, Consul General Yap, and Datuk Sri Chia Cheng Hai, and myself. It is coincidental, yet timely for me to tell everyone this morning about a prominent Malaysian who over 100 years ago was at the forefront of the effort to create a modern public health service in China. This Malaysian was the pioneer of the modern-day surgical mask and also initiated quarantine procedures that helped contain the spread of pneumatic plague in northern China in the 1910s. This man was Dr. Wu Lian-te, the first Malaysian to have been awarded the Queen's Scholarship to study in Cambridge University. After returning from his studies to work as a doctor in Malaysia, Dr. Wu was invited to northeast China to fight the Black Plague. He was said to have helped save a few 100,000 lives at that time. Chia Shanghai and I are fortunate enough to share the same school as Dr. Wu, the Penang Free School. And through MeiCham, we have tried our best to emulate Dr. Wu's vision in bringing honor to Malaysia. Now, let me give a brief description of MeiCham to those of you joining us for the first time today. MeiCham was founded 6 years ago. At the cornerstone of our vision is to promote, support, and represent the interests of the Malaysian business community in Hong Kong, Macau, and southern China, but also to foster a friendly and welcoming community. We continue to bring members and friends together through rain or shine, and even during this global pandemic, such as through this webinar today. In Hong Kong, besides our monthly happy hour gatherings, we organize various seminars, Nasi Lemak talks, and visits to businesses and places of cultural or historical significance. There are about an average of 3 activities every month. We also organize annual trips to Malaysia, each time to a different city or an area. All these trips have included visits to commercial and industrial setups and meeting other business chambers of commerce and members of local government. We have also arranged periodic trips to Macau and to China in the past. MeiCham has also been a champion of corporate social responsibility. Throughout the pandemic, we have supplied medical equipment and surgical masks to the socially vulnerable in Hong Kong, as well as to hospital workers across Malaysia, even in the early months of pandemic when everything was actually short in supply. Additionally, there are about 300 students from Malaysia studying at the 8 public universities in Hong Kong. This is a group of outstanding students who have chosen Hong Kong to build their futures. However, only a small minority of these students are fortunate enough to gain full scholarships and help them cover tuition and Hong Kong's high cost of living. MeiCham deeply admires these students, and so in August 2016, we created a fund to provide additional financial support for our young compatriots in Hong Kong. To date, we have received a total of about $8.5 million Hong Kong dollars in donations. So far, we have donated and awarded 58 students with a grant of 40,000 Hong Kong dollars each per year. And this year, we will be awarding an additional 12 students with this grant. These donations have come from Malaysians in Hong Kong as well as others who share MeiCham's vision. We are extremely grateful for your support and are actively working to ensure the longevity of this fund so that we can continue to award these grants to deserving young Malaysians in years to come. It is our hope that one day these graduates will give back to the fund to support the next generation of Malaysians who have chosen to further their studies in Hong Kong or Macau. Later during this town hall meeting, we will be showcasing a 3-minute video of last year's Merdeka Ball, which is held annually in Hong Kong. And at around the 50-second mark of the video, you will see a group of Malaysian students holding our Malaysian flag. Some of these students are recipients of the Maychem grant. We hope you enjoy the video and the webinar today. Thank you very much.
Next, I would like to welcome Mrs. C.G. Yap to introduce His Excellency. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Gan, Dr. Sri Chia, Dr. Lawrence Liu, and the Maychem team for making this event happen today. Thank you too to Ambassador Raja Dr. Nushiwan for taking the time to join us today. My name is Yap Wei Sin. I'm the Consul General of Malaysia in Hong Kong and Macau. My couple of minutes this morning are to introduce the Ambassador. His Excellency Raja Datu Nushiwan Zainal Abidin graduated from the University of Wales, Aberystwyth. A career diplomat, Ambassador Raja Datu Nushiwan joined the Malaysian Foreign Service in 1994. He has been Ambassador to Malaysia to the People's Republic of China since August last year. As the ambassador, he heads Malaysia's diplomatic network in China, which, in addition to the embassy in Beijing, also comprises our consulates general in Shanghai, Guangzhou, Kunming, Nanning, Xi'an, and Hong Kong. Mongolia is also concurrently accredited to our embassy in Beijing. Prior to his ambassadorship to China, he was the Deputy Secretary General for Bilateral Affairs at the Foreign Ministry. He served in that post from 2017 to 2019. Ambassador Raja Datu Nushiwan has served in various positions at home and abroad in his distinguished diplomatic career thus far. From 2014 to 17, he was the Ambassador of Malaysia to the Islamic Republic of Iran. He has also served as the Deputy Director General of the ASEAN-Malaysia National Secretariat of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 2010 to 2014. His other assignments abroad include at the Permanent Mission of Malaysia to the United Nations in New York from 2006 to 2010, and at the Permanent Mission of Malaysia to the United Nations in Geneva from 1996 to 2001. At the Foreign Ministry, he has also served in the Departments for Multilateral Affairs, including in its Multilateral Economics and Environment Division. Prior to my assignment in Hong Kong, I've had the distinct pleasure of working with Ambassador Raja Datu Nushiwan on a number of occasions when he was Deputy Secretary General and I was working out of the Office of the Secretary General. I must admit that he has always struck me as a very impressive figure at the Foreign Ministry, a figure whom many of us in the Malaysian Foreign Service aspire to emulate. So I'm delighted at the opportunity today for Maychem, the Malaysian community, and members of the business community in Hong Kong to engage and interact with him. So once again, thank you, Ambassador, for joining us today. And thank you, and back to you, Dr. Lawrence.
Thank you, CG. So before we invite His Excellency, I'm going to show the 3 minutes video clip.
'cause I'm alone. If you feel like the roof without the roof, baby, 'cause I'm alone. If you feel like
Standing in the ice, standing in the ice, standing in the ice, standing in the ice, standing in the ice of the world.
Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the clip. And you may realize that all the artists and all the singers and the performers actually we fly in from Malaysia. We use made in Malaysia product. Thank you, and now I'd like to request His Excellency to make his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. I hope all of you can hear me. Pertamanya saya nak mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Encik William dan juga kepada kepimpinan Malaysia atas kesudian menjemput saya untuk memberikan sepatah dua kata pada pagi hari ini. Saya juga ingin mengambil peluang ini memandangkan bahawa kita akan menyambut Hari Kebangsaan dalam masa beberapa hari lagi untuk mengucapkan Selamat Hari Kebangsaan kepada semua komuniti Malaysia berada di Hong Kong dan juga di seluruh China dan kepada semua rakyat Malaysia yang mengikuti webinar ini. First, I'd like to again thank the Malaysian leadership and Mr. Will Yap for the very kind words that they addressed to me. I wasn't sure when Will was saying all of those kind words they were addressed to me or somebody else I didn't know. But nonetheless, thank you very much. I was asked by way of background how this all started off was I had a webinar with all of our consul generals, 6 of them in China, and I indicated that in light of the difficulties with respect to traveling as a result of COVID-19, I would nonetheless like to meet as many Malaysians as possible through webinars and the Zoom platforms, so on and so forth. So at least I'll be able to be in touch with Malaysians in China, making good use of technology. And in all honesty, when I made that request, I didn't realize that in the context of Hong Kong, I will be able to be meeting with so many people. So I'd like to thank Will as well as the leadership of Malaysia and Hong Kong for this opportunity. Rather than make a speech, the organizers were kind enough to inform me of some topics which would be of interest to the Malaysian community in Hong Kong. So rather than making a set speech, the normal fashion, I'll try to address some of those topics which have been identified by the organizers. The first relates to Malaysia-China bilateral relations. As all of you know, it is the 46th year of the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two countries. And since then, ties have grown stronger and stronger. And the relationship, I would categorize it as being very excellent. Our Chinese partners describe Malaysia as being a strong and stable brother in describing our relationship between the two countries. So that's very good. Of course, As many of you are aware, there is a very strong economic dimension to our relationship. China has been our largest trading partner for more than 10 years. It's 11th year actually. And I'm not happy to inform you that despite the difficulties posed by COVID-19, against all odds, trade with China has increased from the period of January to July. And I'm citing Chinese figures, not Malaysian ones, because the methodology is different. And I use that because it would be easier for you to make comparisons since we are all based in China. So for the period of January to July, trade has actually increased marginally, as I mentioned, by 0.7%. So the total is $68 billion. And we sell more to China than the reverse. Our exports to China was to the tune of $40 billion. And their sales to us is about 28 billion. So we enjoy a surplus, pretty large surplus of 12.2 billion. But there's more to economic relations between Malaysia and China. People-to-people links are also very strong. Last year, we had 3.1 million Chinese tourists coming to Malaysia. Obviously, the figure is going to be much smaller this year, if at all, because of COVID-19. And I'm also keen that we expand the relationship further in order to make it more sustainable. So with our consuls as well as my team here in China, what we're looking to expand into are very specific items. For example, we are trying to encourage the translation of literary works from Chinese to Malay. That's one pretty exciting project. Mention was made of the important contribution by Dr. Wu Lian-Teh, and we are hoping to use that, to leverage on that, to further strengthen bilateral relations between our two countries, which is very topical, I think, in light of COVID-19. And it's very important for us to further develop perhaps unexplored areas of bilateral relations in order to make it more sustainable and in order to ensure that our very good positive relations with China benefit as many Malaysians and as many Chinese nationals as possible. So perhaps for this topic, as well as other topics, if you have any questions by way of detail, I'll try to answer them as much as I can during question and answer. There is also perhaps an interest to talk about future dimensions of our bilateral relations. And since the economic component of our bilateral relations plays a very significant role, I'd just like to focus on that, if I may. Previous to COVID-19 and up to now, in terms of trade and in terms of trade, what we're trying to do is to expand the goods that we trade with China, because I think all of you are aware that of the large amount of trade between Malaysia and China, a significant proportion of it is related to E&E products, chemicals and chemical products, petroleum and petroleum products, and so on and so forth. And it's very interesting to note that we more or less sell the same things as we do to China, and vice versa. So those three sectors which I talked about earlier are main components of our trade. And what this goes to show that is that the large trade between our two countries is a factor of the fact that we are part of a common global supply chain. So that's a very important point to remember, because as a result of COVID-19, the global supply chain is currently being reconfigured. So there is now an emphasis not only on efficiency, but also on resilience. So moving forward, what we're going to see, I think, is rather than a very lengthy global supply chain, is what we're seeing now, there will be a shortening of that global supply chain. So that's a key defining feature post COVID-19, which we have to address and recognize. The second fundamental shift, I think, on global supply chains post COVID-19, beyond, as I mentioned, the shortening of it, is the means with which value is added in this new global supply chain. Fundamentally, what we are seeing now is an increase, or rather a change in the way that value is added to the global supply chain, resulting from increased specialization through internal divisions of labor throughout the global supply chain. And to exemplify this, if you want to build a product which is quite advanced, then you would have to invest a significant proportion of capital by the vendors in let's say Malaysia. So increasingly, I think these vendors will try to maximize their investment by adding value into what they already have or what they're already doing, but to other new products as well. And what is happening in Malaysia, I suspect, is happening all over the world. And I think that this will intensify in the post-COVID-19 situation. And this relates to the third fundamental shift in the global supply chain, which is already occurring, but I think we will accelerate moving forward, which is the increased use of artificial intelligence in the global supply chain. So basically three fundamental changes to the global supply chain post-COVID-19, which are already there, which are already very clear trends, but which will be accelerated by COVID-19. So as I mentioned, to recap, the first is shortening of the global supply chain to make sure that it is not only efficient, but it is also resilient. Secondly, the means through which value is added in specific components of the global supply chain is going to change. And thirdly is an increase on the increased use of artificial intelligence. So very fundamental changes. So that's one aspect of the economic components. The second aspect is some fundamental changes in the Chinese economy as well. I think all of you are very aware that the Chinese government is now changing its approach to economic development by emphasizing its biggest advantage, which is its huge internal market of 1.4 billion consumers. So there will be greater emphasis on domestic consumption as a means of promoting growth. And at the same time, by using external links in order to promote consumption and economic growth in China. So in short, it will no longer be an export-oriented economy as a means of achieving growth. So all of these two fundamental changes as a result of COVID-19 presents lots of opportunities for Malaysia to strengthen our bilateral economic relations with China. And we have to take advantage of the strengths which we already possess. Moving forward, and this is probably common knowledge, and I suspect that for those who are in business or in the private sector know this far better than I do, that moving forward, the challenge is for countries like Malaysia, small countries with small markets, in relative terms, is to find niche areas and to ensure that we can add value as much as possible in those niche areas. So again, now and in the future, what are the best ways of adding value? I suspect it boils down to three things. One is branding. The second is design, and third is innovation. And I must say that from the year that I have been here, coming into contact with Malaysians, as well as with Chinese businessmen and friends in the Chinese government, there is a sense that while we were ahead of our competition in the past, we've not done so well in terms of building our advantages. So in short, some of the things which we were selling to the Chinese market 5 or 10 years ago are exactly some of the stuff that we're selling today. And it has not kept in tandem with the increased level of sophistication in the Chinese market. So Malaysian companies need to strengthen our position in terms, as I mentioned earlier on, value addition by way of strengthening branding, innovation, and design. So this is a challenge which I pose to Malaysians who are in business and the private sector and in China. Of course, the Malaysian government, particularly the embassy in Beijing, as well as all of our 6 consulates in China, are ready to engage with you and assist you, along with the MACHAM chapters in all of China, in order to achieve this aim. So that's the second point that I wanted to emphasize on future directions for Malaysia-China bilateral relations. I'm very aware of the time that was given to me, 45 minutes. So I'll try to compress all of these topics as much as I can. I'd be more than happy to listen to your advice as well as comments and questions later on. In fact, in an ideal situation, I would prefer it if my presentation to you is kept to a minimum and we maximize the engagement that we have with one another. The third issue is the sexy topic of the day, which is China-US bilateral relations, how it will impact Malaysia, as well as Malaysia's relations with these 2 major countries. I want to first emphasize that there is a lot of attention given to a potential situation in the South China Sea in light of the increasing political temperature between China and the US. I want to emphasize that, as Will mentioned earlier, I was in charge of the bilateral department in my previous assignment. So in that capacity, I had to manage relations with all of the countries in the world, including China and the US. And I must say that during that time, we have never been asked to choose between China and the US. There's never been a time when in deciding or recommending a specific course of action that I had in the back of my mind, what will the Chinese think? Or conversely, what will the US think? And decisions are made based on the merits of the case and bilateral relations with that particular country. And after a decision has been made, there has never been a time when my Chinese or US interlocutors have asked or expressed displeasure about the course of action that we've taken vis-a-vis the other country. So, contrary to what a lot of people may think, that in Malaysia, we never have to choose between China and the US. As I mentioned earlier, we will decide on the merits of each case based on bilateral considerations with that particular country. So it's a very, very important point that I want to emphasize. The second point that I want to emphasize as well is that despite all of the things that's appearing in articles, newspapers, magazines, and things like that, in all honesty, managing the South China Sea issue is a very small component of bilateral relations between Malaysia and China. I mean, I don't suffer sleepless nights because of that. In fact, due to the very good relationship between our two countries, I must say that I don't suffer sleepless nights at all, thankfully. So I wanted to make those two very important points very clearly to all present. Just to emphasize, one, we don't choose, and we don't feel that we need to choose between the two. And secondly, contrary to popular expectation, the South China Sea issue is a matter which is a very small component of bilateral relations between Malaysia and China. I get a sense that in the case of both China and the US, they are not out to get anyone in the region. But increased tensions between these two major powers may have the effect of poisoning the situation, which is a requirement for the progress and prosperity of countries in the region, including Malaysia. There was a very important article by Dr. Yang Jiechi, which appeared last week, and which I find to be very constructive and positive, even conciliatory towards the US, while at the same time marking very clearly what China's core interests are. So I'm very happy with this kind of approach that's been taken by the Chinese government, and we have every confidence that if there is a willingness and desire for both countries to cooperate, to reconcile, then the world will be a much better place. And certainly good bilateral relations between the largest and the second largest economy in the world is extremely critical in light of the very many challenges that the world is facing right now. But I'll be more than happy to answer some of the questions which you may have on this issue later on. There is perhaps also an interest in terms of Malaysia's sustainable participation in the Belt and Road Initiative. Of course, given Malaysia's geographical position in the world, Malaysia is a very important partner of China in this Belt and Road Initiative, both in terms of the land connectivity as well as the maritime connectivity. Because uniquely amongst countries in Southeast Asia, we are the country which is contiguous to mainland Asia, yet also part of the broader maritime Southeast Asia region. So geographically, we are unique and therefore have an important and significant role to play in any connectivity efforts in the region, including the Belt and Road Initiative. Of course, there is a very strong political commitment on the part of both governments to the BRI and to the promotion of Malaysia's participation in the BRI. But we also must not forget that these projects are essentially carried out by the private sector, and therefore it will have to be dictated by the commercial logic and viability of each and every project. And while the government can have can play a supporting role. Essentially, it is a matter for the private sector. So that's the fourth issue related to Malaysia's sustainable participation in the Belt and Road Initiative. The other point, which I also like to mention, is which I'm sure will be asked in very many ways by the Malaysian community, and this um, is about political developments back home. Now, I want to emphasize that as a civil servant, I am politically neutral, which means that I will support the civil service will support the duly elected government of the day, regardless of the party. We will, of course, have to support the government, which has been elected by the people and reflects the will of the majority of the people. So we are politically neutral. But I like to cast my remarks in terms of what is happening in a couple of days' time. That is the celebration of our National Day. So I want to emphasize essentially a message of unity amongst Malaysians. All of us will have in our private capacities preferences for certain personalities or political parties. I mean, this is natural in a democracy, and that is very healthy. Indeed, a lot of noise is natural in any democracy. You cannot have a quiet democracy. This is not the nature of the beast. So again, despite all of the things which may be said by individuals, etc., I think we have to remember certain principles. And I'd like to emphasize some of those principles. The first is it's all about the people. Malaysia and quite any country is about the people. And the central theme and central challenge for our beloved country in the past, today, and in the future is always and will always be the promotion of unity amongst all of Malaysians. Related to that is our democratic system. So this relates to a broader issue of the philosophy of Malaysia, which, as I mentioned earlier on, is firstly the continued promotion of unity, and secondly, a democratic framework. And this is something which we need to be very proud of. And I'm very happy to know that in terms of the philosophy, although it may change in its nuances as the years go by, broadly speaking, there is always an agreement on these two very fundamental issues regarding the governance of the country: promotion of national unity, and secondly, a democratic framework. So that is as far as the philosophy is concerned. The second principle, which I think needs to be emphasized again and again, is the importance of institutions. And when I say institutions, it is not only the institutions of political parties in the country, but those fundamental institutions which frame the activities and the way in which political parties interact with one another. These are the courts, parliament, the monarchy. I'm very happy to note that despite all of the changes that has taken place, experience over the past few years have shown that all of the Malaysian institutions are robust. No one, for example, says that we should operate out of the framework of the parliament. There may be discussions or disagreements, very strong disagreements perhaps, on certain interpretations or certain rules related to our parliamentary democracy. But there is no one political party which says that let's forget about parliament and do things outside. So that's something to be proud of. The second institution is perhaps the courts. Of course, it is in human nature not to agree with decisions of the court which goes against us. I mean, this is true for a $50 summons as it is for big constitutional issues. This is natural. But generally, when court decisions are made, despite protests, despite the noise, etc., they are respected and they get carried out and executed. There is, of course, the stabilizing institution of the monarchy. I'm very gratified, and it almost brought a tear to my eye when there was this cartoon which said during the events of February that in country X, if there is a political crisis, you will see demonstrators fighting with the police. In country Y, demonstrators fighting with other demonstrators. Country X, demonstrators burning down property and things like that. But in Malaysia, the picture is of our beloved Yang di-Pertuan Agong handing out McDonald's food to reporters outside of the National Palace. So this shows the trust and robustness of the people in the monarchy, as well as the fundamental institutions in our country. So I thought that I had to mention all of those three very important points. Firstly, a common philosophy. Secondly, institutions. And lastly, perhaps the most important of them all, is the people. Because generally, Malaysians are very mature. And if the situation is explained to Malaysians in a very transparent and honest manner, Malaysians are willing to make very big sacrifices. For example, the imposition of the controlled movement order, which of course affected Malaysians in very fundamental, if I may say, in very painful ways. But it was explained to them in a very mature fashion, in a very transparent way, by a professional, and Malaysians were willing to make huge sacrifices. Of course, there was maybe some teething issues related to the rolling out of some specific measures, but that is normal. It happened everywhere in the world. For one thing, we don't know how people will react when the rubber hits the road. And secondly, as far as even the science is concerned, there are still a lot of big questions which remain to be answered. But generally, when it is explained to the Malaysian people, we were willing to make big sacrifices. So even during the events of last February, it was the case. We did not see demonstrations or fighting between the government and the people, so on and so forth. And the people, if you talk to Malaysians in a very sincere fashion, I think can say proudly that we are a mature and responsible people who have in our hearts the desire to make our country a better place. And just as importantly, with a fundamental respect for other Malaysians. So I thought that I wanted to say these very few brief words in terms of the philosophy of our country, the institution which undergird governance in our country, and thirdly, most importantly, the people of Malaysia. I think I probably like to stop at that because there were other topics which were made known to me by the organizers. But as I mentioned to you earlier on, I would much prefer that we engage in a very transparent and honest manner, and I much prefer to do that. For that, I will say thank you for to all of you. As I mentioned earlier on, I was very surprised about the very good reception given to this session, and I look forward to engaging more deeply with you in the next few sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency. So I think we learned a lot today. And now I'm going to hand over the Q&A sessions to our moderator, Dr. Sri Chia Cheng Hai. And as I briefly said just now, Dr. Chia Cheng Hai is the convener of the Advisory Council of MAYCHAM, and he's the co-CIO and chairman for Value Partner Groups, a fund management company listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Sri Chia. Dr. Sri Chia, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador, for your very excellent and wide-ranging discussion of the very important topics. And thank you, audience. I think we have roughly 150 people right now listening to us. So, Ambassador, I done some research on you and your mission. It's well known that you're one of the high flyers in the Malaysian civil service. In fact, I'm told by some of your colleagues, your nickname in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is King, K-I-N-G. So first, we are very impressed. Thank you. And I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of you in public affairs in the future. But secondly, we need to know more about you, not as an official, but as a human being. Where you come from, your education, your background, your life journey. And if it's not a privacy issue, maybe a little bit about your family as well. Can you tell us more about yourself as a human being?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Sri. I found it rather embarrassing, but nonetheless, I take it in the very good spirit in which those remarks are made. Thank you very much. I've led a very boring life, in all honesty. I was born in KL. I went to the same school, St. John's, for 11 years, from Standard 1 up to Form 5. Then, against all odds, I won a government scholarship, which sent me to the UK, as Will was mentioning. And against all odds, I graduated. And after that, I joined the Foreign Ministry. And to be perfectly honest, at that point, after I graduated, I didn't know what to do. So as it turns out, as a government scholar, I had to work for the government for 10 years. So I had no idea which ministry I should be joining. And I thought that Foreign Ministry sounded vaguely interesting. And before I knew it, they had posted me to Geneva, New York, Iran, and suddenly I find myself in Beijing. So not as a product of design or anything like that. So very boring. And in terms of my family, I think for my colleagues here in Beijing, almost all of our families went back in either late January or February as part of the repatriation process. And unfortunately, they're still there because of flight connections, so on and so forth. So my colleagues at the embassy are putting a lot of pressure on me to get their families back. And of course, I miss mine as well. And in fact, as it turns out, if I may say, my wife delivered our son on the 28th of June. And I had planned actually to go back before that and to get myself quarantined, be there for the delivery, and then come back. But then there was this outbreak, right, at the market in Beijing. So I thought that my first responsibility, my professional responsibility, is of course to the Malaysian community in China. So I thought that at that point it would not be fair for me to leave my professional responsibility for a personal one. So I've not been able to go back. And so my wife, alhamdulillah, she delivered our son on the 28th of June. And now the challenge is I seem to be missing them much more than they seem to be missing me. So I hope that they'll be able to come back as soon as possible. So I think I'll just stop at that. But to put a long story short, very boring life. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that color. Still not very sure how it is that you come to be a fast-track civil servant. So now, what does it really take to be a great diplomat? You were already the Deputy Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The highest position in the ministry is Secretary General, and you now hold this prestigious position, Ambassador to the People's Republic of China. But at the end of the day, you had to work for politicians. The minister, the deputy minister are political appointments who are appointed by the prime minister. What is your advice to fellow civil servants? How does a public servant work with his political boss? What does it take? And also, what does it take to be a successful diplomat?
Well, I'll address the second question first because I think that's a safer one, right? Yeah, I was actually asked. And this is something that they don't teach you at the Diplomatic Institute in Malaysia, because if you want to join the foreign ministry, you have to spend X number of months in training at our civil service college, followed by training at our Diplomatic Institute. So a question was asked me, what is important for ambassador? So I say that this is the most important thing to become a good ambassador, and they don't teach you at any diplomatic academy anywhere in the world, I don't think, is that you've got to have a strong bladder. You have to have a strong bladder, because there will be situations where you really need to go to the toilet, but you can't. So now, fortunately, it's not the case for me. But that's something that's very fundamental. Second thing is, it's just like any other profession. You've got to like it. You really have to like it. You have to have an interest in it. It's no use doing something which you don't like and which you have no interest. So if you go to any country is worthwhile going to and learning about, because in all honesty, in all of my as a young diplomat and even as a layman, you think that why is this country behaving in such a way? This is all very bizarre and things like that. But if you go to a country, then you will start to understand what may seem to be very strange to us is actually incredibly logical if you see it from their perspective. So as diplomats, you have to understand that. So you cannot dislike the country which you go to. And the third thing, which I always share with my younger colleagues, is that contrary to popular opinion, you will never know where you will find happiness. You may think that, okay, if I go to a rich country, X, Y, and Z, I will be happy there. But sometimes it doesn't turn out to be the case, because you have a feel. You go there, and after a couple of weeks, months, or even years, you have this sense that you don't understand these people and they don't understand you. But you go to a place which is poor, downtrodden, and all kinds of stuff, bad things said about that, about that country. But when you go there, you get a sense that I understand this country, and you like them, and they like you, and it's quite you can't explain it. It's just like why you get along with some people and why you don't get along with others. So you will never know where you will find happiness. So never turn down an opportunity to go to any country. And the third point, the next point is you must always be on the lookout for opportunities to learn. And you can learn from the good things that happen to you, and you can also learn from the bad things that happen to you. And in diplomacy and life in general, I think the only way to be good at something is for you to do it. You can't be good at it if you don't do it. If you read about it or you theorize about it, that's not good enough. So the more things that you do, the better that you become generally. So I think it's pretty straightforward. You don't need to be a rocket science. And lastly, I'm not sure whether I'm a high flyer or not. That's not up for me to judge. But I just want to emphasize that sometimes you go into a job, you have no idea what the job entails. You're just put there, and suddenly you're there, and you have to make the best of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Essentially, you're saying you had a passion, you had a engagement, you had a professional curiosity. I totally agree. Yeah. There's always a joke about diplomats, diplomatic immunity, that you can park your car anywhere and not get a parking ticket. But I'm sure that's just a very small part of the job. Yeah. Now, more seriously,
That's not even true.
it's not even true. Oh, I see. Okay, it's a media thing. Huh? Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
it's an urban legend. Yeah. No, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was looking at some publicity media articles about you and your mission in People's Republic of China. I noticed that actually you guys did some very heroic things during the worst days of COVID-19. You were successful in evacuating between 150 to 200 Malaysians and their families from China. What can we learn from that handling of that unusual emergency? What do we need to know about it for future reference?
Okay. I want to be very clear. I am not a hero. I was just a manager. The heroes are my colleagues, the 6 of them who actually went to Wuhan when at the height of the outbreak. So I'm just a manager. The real heroes are my colleagues. And as it turns out, I have in my room one of them, Suana. Come on, Suana. This is Suana. The real hero.
Hi everyone, hi Dr. Sri, hi CG Will.
Greetings from all of us at Malaysian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, in Macau.
Suhana went, of course, because she's a fluent Chinese speaker and a variety of reasons as well. But I said that I'm a manager, but at the end of the day, I think all people in leadership positions will know that the most difficult thing, the most difficult decision that you ever have to undertake relates to a decision which involves putting your colleagues in situations of potential harm. Because there is a human dimension to this. These 6 colleagues of mine, they have families, and they have feelings as well. So I took this decision very, very carefully, and it was not very lightly taken. And I mentioned that I don't normally have problems sleeping, even when it comes to the South China Sea issues and stuff like that. But I have to admit that making that decision caused me sleepless nights. It really did. Because as I mentioned, you're putting your colleagues and the whom you know their families in a potential of potential harm. But I have to say that when I asked them to go, and I told them the reasons why they have been selected, not one of them said no. So I'm very proud of them. So we set we had 2 repatriation situations in Wuhan, involving altogether 8 of my colleagues. So all of them did very well. So I'm very thankful for them. But you see, we were also very lucky because we have very good and close relationship with the Chinese government, and they really facilitated our repatriation exercise. Of course, at the end of the day, there are always issues. You plan for whatever eventualities, but as they say in boxing, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So you get a situation where people are staying very far away. They were in Hubei province, but far from Wuhan, And for at each place, they were in each district, the county, they had roadblocks, and people manning the roadblocks may have inconsistent standards. You pass one roadblock, you go to the next roadblock, people at that roadblock may have other ideas, but in the end, we managed to overcome these obstacles. And I must also say thank you very much to all of our partners, our agencies, government agencies in Malaysia, NATMA and Ministry of Health, so on and so forth, and AirAsia. And now, tell me just a small story. People always say that a true test of power is if you are able to stop a plane from leaving, right? Um, so during the first repatriation exercise, one family was not able to reach the airport in time. It was a question of, do we leave these people or do we don't? Because the understanding was that if anybody comes late, we have to consider the welfare of the majority of the people. So there was a possibility that a few people might be left behind. So one family was late, and so in the end, headquarters asked me to talk to to AirAsia as well as the airport operators, whether we could stop the plane from leaving at that prescribed time. And I talked to them, and they were very kind. They said that Mr. Ambassador, we are willing to wait. So in the end, the family did manage to arrive in time and get on the plane. So I was very happy, and I didn't realize that the Malaysian ambassador in China had this power to stop a plane from leaving.
Our sincere congratulations to your team and to you for this very impressive handling of a very difficult situation. I now move on to some questions relating to China and Malaysia. Just out of curiosity, have you met the top Chinese leaders, like maybe the president, the foreign minister, and what is your impression of them?
Well, for any ambassador, you will have a chance to present your credentials to the head of state. So in my case, that was the same for me. I did that with President Xi Jinping. We also met as a group with the Premier Li Keqiang as well. But very difficult for you to judge a person on the basis of meeting in a very scripted fashion over the course of about 10 minutes. But I was very impressed with both of them about the positive words they had to say about Malaysia and Malaysians in general, and some of the level of detail that they know about our country. So I know that for both of them, they have been to Malaysia before in this capacity as well as in previous capacities. So we are very familiar to them, and I think in terms of getting access or meeting leading Chinese personalities, it's not a problem as well, because as I mentioned very early on, probably the first thing that I mentioned is the excellent state of relations between Malaysia and China. I have to say that there is we don't have any problems. The South China Sea, I don't call it a problem. It is a common challenge which both countries need to address. But to the extent that there are problems, some of them are even happy problems to have.
What's next in the bilateral relationship? Will we see visits by Chinese leaders to Kuala Lumpur, or will we see visits by our leaders to Beijing in the coming 1 or 2 years?
Well, it all depends on how the COVID-19 situation pans out. But perhaps fundamentally, we are looking at whether a vaccine can be developed in good time or otherwise. So certainly there is progress here in China and elsewhere. But I think for China, very positive messages that we've been getting from the Chinese leadership, and this is public information as well, that if China develops a vaccine, then they will make it as a global public good, so that they will put at the disposal this vaccine to everyone.
Ambassador, what is your impression in general of the Chinese public's opinion and perception of Malaysia?
I think it's been very positive. I mean, of course, looking at some of the emails that come to me, some people will have very specific complaints. Of course, they were supposed to go for a vacation in Malaysia, put in their deposit and stuff like that, and then because of COVID-19, they were not able to get their deposit back, things like that. But there is no structural or systemic problem with respect to the Chinese perception of Malaysia and Malaysians. So I'd like to thank all Malaysians who are in China for playing a very good and useful role as little ambassadors for the country as a whole.
What is our official line on the national security legislation that's been introduced for Hong Kong?
I think it's very clear. For individual Malaysians, the advice for Malaysians in Hong Kong is the same as the advice given to all Malaysians outside of the country. You have to abide by the rules of that country. That's one. And the second thing is Hong Kong is a part of China, and this is an internal matter for China.
Thank you. That's extremely clear. Yeah, I'll just do some housekeeping questions and then turn it over to the floor for questions from the audience. The housekeeping questions I'll package into one single question. What are we doing to assist Malaysians who are stuck in China with expired visas? What are we doing in the other way around for Malaysians who are back in Malaysia who want to go back to China to their jobs or families? Can we fast track them? These are the housekeeping questions.
I think housekeeping questions are probably the most important questions, right? Because they affect people's lives in a very fundamental and real way.
And one third question, in case there's an election, can we facilitate postal voting by Malaysians who are currently based in mainland China, Hong Kong, or Macau?
I'll answer the third question first. We will follow instructions from the Elections Commission. If this is the guidance that's given to us, then we will execute them as fully and as well as we can. From the embassy's part, I say very clearly, it will come from the Elections Commission, because we are just the executors of the guidance given. In terms of the visas, of course, this is an issue which needs to be addressed with the Chinese authorities, and the reasons for the expiry of visas are very different for very many Malaysians. So I can't go into specific detail as to an interaction between a specific Malaysian individual and the Chinese authorities. But certainly, if you do have a consular problem, then as I mentioned, in addition to Beijing, we have 6 other consulates, and our consular staff will be more than happy to assist. For those Malaysians still in Malaysia, but working in China, certainly we will have to further refine and discuss with our Chinese counterparts about the establishment of a possible green lane or travel bubble between both countries. As all of you are aware, a lot of our attention has been devoted to putting in place the arrangements for movement between Malaysia and Singapore and back because of the huge number of people involved. So that's taken up quite a lot of bandwidth on the part of my colleagues at home.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Yeah, we now invite questions from the audience. There's one right. There are quite a number of questions out. I'll read them out. First is from Michael. It says Vietnam seems to be attracting China's investment. How is Malaysian government positioning itself to win this opportunity? And he also want to say, how can we help China improve her relationship with the rest of the world, leveraging on our neutrality?
Thank you. The first point, Vietnam. It's all a question of where we are in the global supply chain again. My emphasis since coming to Malaysia in terms of investment is to attract a specific kind of investment to Malaysia. And that specific kind of investment is high value added and advanced investment in the manufacturing sector. So it's got to be high value added and advanced. These are the types of investments that we're looking to in China. And I don't want to disparage anybody, but we have to be very clear that sometimes we can be constrained by numbers. After all, a 1 billion industry in a factory making children's underwear is quite different from an investment of 1 billion, same amount, in research and in development for a cure for cancer. So it's quite different. Secondly, with respect to Vietnam, in their case, investment has come in as part of the global supply chain. But although there's a lot of investment in dollar terms coming into Vietnam from China, but another important part of that equation is that country has consistently run a balance of trade deficit with China. Whereas in our case, we are part of the global supply chain, which involves Chinese investment in Malaysia, but according to Chinese figures, we consistently run a trade surplus with China. And as I mentioned very early on, that again, quoting Chinese figures, the balance of trade between our two countries is in Malaysia's favor to the tune of $12.2 billion. So I think we have to mention that. I have to mention that point. And in terms of China's relationship with the rest of the world and what we can do, I think that the Chinese have a very sophisticated analysis of the world. They also have extremely competent and very sophisticated diplomats as well. They're more than able to, I think, handle these issues without assistance from Malaysia. But I think the way that we add value to this entire situation right now is that we show that we have good bilateral relations with China, and therefore it is possible, so long as certain principles are adhered to: non-interference, mutual respect, and most importantly is an attitude of sincerity to promote bilateral relations.
Here's another question from the audience, from YY, which is, we are going to let the participant post the question directly. Then we can see the questioner.
Okay.
Please go.
All right.
YY, please.
Hello, hi. First of all, thank you very much, Mei Chen, for organizing the talk. I'm actually calling you from my quarantine center in Singapore. I've just relocated from US and currently in a hotel room joining the call. So Your Excellencies, thank you very much for your insights, and I certainly can relate to what you have actually shared in terms of moving around. I've actually moved around for the last 20 years. So my question is actually relates to what you actually talk about in terms of the value creation. So how do you see in terms of the way that Malaysian company can differentiate itself in terms of the types of value and niche we can offer versus other countries? And the second part of my question is that what will be your advice to individuals and companies in terms of to better prepare for the post-COVID world and also to continue to seize the opportunity going forward? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not in the private sector and I have no experience of business. So I can only share with you some of the insights that I myself have received in my interactions with interlocutors in China and Malaysia as well. Now, as I mentioned to you, the first point is we have to have a laser-like focus on value addition in niche areas, because we are a small country, and in all honesty, I don't think we have a lot of expertise in very many things. So we have to identify something which we can have a strong niche presence. I mean, take for example, I mean, we all know this about the manufacturing of rubber gloves, especially medical rubber gloves. I mean, I used to say that I used to think rather that Malaysia is the Saudi Arabia of rubber medical gloves. But in fact, what Saudi Arabia is to the petroleum industry, we are that to that particular product. But we supply 65% of that product. So, and it's apparently it's not that easy to make these gloves. I mean, you have to have a certain quality, a certain thickness, so on and so forth. I think some of those here joining us in this webinar knows these things far more than I do. But we have to think along those lines. The second point that I'd like to make is I suspect, I don't know whether I'm right or not, but I suspect that Malaysia has potentially a strong niche in terms of development of content rather than the nuts and screws of the global supply chain, because there's a lot of creativity in Malaysia, but I suspect that the problem is it's not well developed. We don't appreciate the creativity in Malaysia, and because of that, you know, we are not as strong as we can be in those areas of value addition that I talked about early on, which is firstly branding, design and innovation. I'd just like to give you a very specific example. I was in Rome, I think last year or year before last. So I was having this, I was having breakfast at this restaurant, and it struck me as being quite unique about the cup in which the cappuccino was served. And let me remind you, you know, for Italians, if you want to drink coffee with milk, it's only in the morning. You know, you don't drink cappuccino in the afternoon or later on. This is very barbaric for them. So anyway, that was in the morning. So I was having this cappuccino, and you know, the waiter there was very interesting and was very knowledgeable. So she asked me whether I found anything unique in that cup or not, which I didn't think about before that. And then I was thinking, yeah, it's quite nice, the design, etc. But she said that this cup is very special because it can contain a cappuccino in that temperature for a long period of time. Yet at the same time, when you touch it, it's not too hot to the touch. And thirdly, it was not very heavy. And then it struck me that this is actually a pretty special cup or mug. But those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about in terms of strengthening our presence in value, in terms of design, innovation and branding. So lots of things that Malaysians can do. And you know, when I talk to Malaysians, very individual level, these are the things that people think about, but somehow we're not able to 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 focus on them and leverage on the natural talents that we have.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'll just jump in quickly because we have a question from our very distinguished member, Song Hoi Si, who is known as the biggest operator of airport launches in the world under the Plaza Premium brand. So Mr. Song asked me on his behalf to ask you a very simple question. When will we see a resumption of flights between Malaysia and China?
I have a very simple response to this very simple question. And that response is, I don't know. There are too many factors, too many variables, and essentially it's also a commercial decision. So I sounded flippant, but apparently it's a very complicated situation, a very complicated commercial decision, which needs to be undertaken by the airlines. So in all honesty, I don't know. I hope that it will happen sooner than later, because as I mentioned, my family is back in Malaysia, so I have a personal interest in this particular issue.
Next question is from Saniza Othman, whose father, I think herself, was a very senior diplomat for Malaysia. Saniza, please go ahead. I will ask on her behalf. I'll just read it out. Geopolitics is fundamentally altered with the rise of China. We are witnessing the emergence of the Pacific Hemisphere. How do you see the opportunity for Malaysia to develop diplomatic heft to play a catalytic role to dynamize the Pacific Hemisphere?
Sorry, hedge. There was
okay, yeah, what Sanisa would like to know is what can we do, we Malaysia do, in the light of China's rise as a major power? What can we do to I would say, excel our role, our position?
Oh, very interesting, and very fundamental question. The first thing that I want to emphasize is that China is not rising. China is re-emerging. Wow. So it's re-emerging. Up to 1820, for thousands of years, China was the largest economy in the world because they had the muscle, they had the innovation. And that's another point. Just to footnote that the Chinese have been traditionally a very innovative society. So what they're doing right now in terms of artificial intelligence is nothing new. They've done it in the past, but they are a re-emerging country. So, I say this to my counterparts from the West when they come to see me in my previous capacity and today. They are re-emerging economy, and where China is and where they will be is in the natural order of things. This is how it was and how it will be in the future. So we have to wake up to that reality and accept it. That's one. Two is, for Malaysia, since we've established diplomatic relations with China in the past, for the past 46 years, our strategic assessment of China is that it is too big a country to be left out in the cold. The world will profit by a strong, stable, prosperous China within the mainstream of the family of nations, helping to create and support and enforce international law. This is our strategic assessment for China since the establishment of diplomatic relations. And I was since coming here, I've been reading much more than I was before about how China sees itself in the world. And there was a very interesting article, there was a very interesting speech by Deng Xiaoping in 1974 to the United Nations. And it's a very long speech. It talked about very many things, about how it viewed the role of superpowers in the world, the existence of superpowers. So Deng Xiaoping said that China will not be a superpower in the traditional sense of exercising hegemony. At that time, the US and the Soviet Union superpowers wanted to control the world. So Deng Xiaoping said, by definition, a superpower will seek hegemonic status. And by definition, China will never become a superpower. And he even said that if China becomes a superpower and it tries to exercise hegemony and to bully other countries, and pay attention, he said that the other countries of the world must work with the Chinese people and overthrow the regime. This is what he said. And up to today, there is nothing to suggest that China wants to dominate the world in the way that a superpower would want to dominate the world. Of course, China wants respect. Of course, it has its interests. Of course, the level of respect and its interests are commensurate with its size and the historical role that it's played in the world. So there is not a problem, at least for Malaysia. As long as China plays by the rules, which they themselves help to write, we're fine. And there is nothing to suggest that they're doing otherwise. There is, they of course have problems with their neighbors. And this is a fact of history. This is a reality. As I mentioned, they're very sophisticated analysts. They have a very sophisticated foreign service, and they're more than able to handle these problems.
Well, you are right there on the front line, so you should know what you're talking about. Thank you for sharing. I can't resist. We're going on to the last question in the interest of time, but you know the Western media talks about wolf diplomacy from China these days, that they are more assertive, more aggressive, the Chinese foreign ministry people. Are you seeing that yourself?
Well, I think what the Chinese are doing is that they are responding like for like. And people are saying very nasty things about them, and they are responding in turn. But you know, China is a complicated country. All countries by its nature are complicated. So we always have to be certain that what things are said, whether they are translated into action or not. You know, as they say, the test of the pudding is in the eating. And unfortunately for China, I think very unfairly, people have taken a certain perception of them, which I think Malaysia doesn't share. I mean, we have good relations with the West, excellent relations with America, excellent relations with China as well. But we also understand that that some of these developments are related to some fundamental issues in core constituencies in those countries. So we accept them.
The last question comes from a member of the audience, Alice Chia. I'll read out her question. China should change its mindset by taking a proactive role diplomatically to re-establish Belt and Road Initiative to ensure it benefits all countries. Is there any sign that China is heading towards the direction of a new mindset?
Well, I can't say for Belt and Road projects in other countries. I can only say what Malaysia's own experience is. We had an issue about the cost of the ECRL. We negotiated with the Chinese. I mean, these were very hard negotiations. I mean, this is quite obvious and it's no secret. But in the end, we came to a decision which was a win-win situation, I think. which was mutually beneficial. So certainly, as I mentioned, I cannot speak about the experience of other countries, but in the particular case of the ECRL, there was we felt that there was a certain recalibration that was needed, and we entered into discussions with them very frankly and openly, and we managed to resolve that problem.
Sorry, there's a last minute question which you don't actually have to answer unless you wish to. The Malaysian authorities have said that Joe Low is hiding in Macau, which is part of the territory of the People's Republic of China. What do you say to that?
Well, let's just say that I've not been to Macau and I've not bumped into him. But I think that I may say this flippantly, but I want to emphasize a very important point. And this is the point I want to make. That as ambassador, as a professional, I'm guided by the facts. There are other people in the Malaysian system who probably know these things better than I. So I am not sure. I cannot give an answer. I can only say that I don't know.
It's been very nice talking to you. I think you are a really excellent conversationalist, and I'm sure our country will see a lot more of you in the years and years to come. I will bring back Dr. Lawrence Liu to bring proceedings to a close. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you, Mr. CG Yap. And unfortunately, we need to make the event to a close. Thank you for all the participants. And please be advised that actually the recording for this session will be available on YouTube, and we'll send you the link when it's ready. So thank you once again. And for those who are not yet a member of MAYCHAM, we would strongly encourage you to please sign up, support us, so that we can continue to bring along events such as this, which is a very meaningful event, especially when away from home. Thank you once again for the participants, His Excellency, CG, and Dr. Gan and Dr. Sri Chacheng Hai. Thank you very much, and jumpa lagi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.